Calling to order Historic Landmarks Commission, March 29th, 2023. If we can have a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, not roll call vote, sorry.
We're going to vote if we're here or not.
Roll call.
Thank you, Chair Grumbine.
Forget everything. Yep.
I'll go ahead and take a roll call. Chair Grumbine,
Present?
Vice Chair House,
I'm here.
Commissioner Butler,
Here.
Commissioner Dorden,
Here.
Commissioner Drury,
Here.
Commissioner Ensberg is absent, Commissioner Lenvik,
Present.
Commissioner McClure is also absent, and Commissioner Uli.
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's start with our first item, which is item A, public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled on this agenda for a public discussion. So is there anyone in the room that would like to speak on an item that is not going to be on coming up today? All right, not seeing anyone in the room. Should we go to virtual?
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. If anyone participating virtually would like to speak on general business on items not on today's agenda, please raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, we did receive written correspondence from Mary Walls and Jackie Berlardo, which was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting. Back to you.
All right, thank you. All right, and we'll go to item B, approval of the minutes of Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of March 15th, 2023.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second by Commissioner Drury. Under discussion, any edits of the minutes? Edits, corrections?
No, sir.
All right, not seeing any. Let's have a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Dorden,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
and Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. On to item C, approval of the consent calendar for March 29th, 2023. To Ms. Rydell?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, I guess we get, sorry, Commissioner Drury's move to approve it, and second by Vice Chair House. And then now.
Do you want to know what happened?
Rydell,
Or no?
yeah.
Really exciting.
Item A, 620 Sierra Street received project design approval and final approval. Item B, 1120 Alameda Padre Serra received project design approval and final approval with the condition that the stone veneer be real sandstone.
All right, any discussion or questions, discussion about it? Consent calendar? All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Dorden,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
and Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we'll go on to item D, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances, withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff has a couple of brief announcements. Item 2 has been postponed to a date certain of April 12th, and there is a minor correction on the project description. There is no hardscaping proposed. It is bank improvements. So that project description will be corrected on the April 12th agenda. And this, for my second announcement, the State Street discussion was postponed to a date certain of March 29th, but has been postponed indefinitely. And now I believe Nicole has some announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. We had a request come in to the whole city from the Conservancy, the Santa Barbara Conservancy, to work on the 100-year anniversary coming up in 2 years for the earthquake. And they sent it to me, and we are working with a couple members of this commission on a ad hoc subcommittee to get some ideas on how the city could participate and coordinate with the Conservancy and the community. So the committee would put together some ideas to put forward to council, and we could start to meet and generate those ideas. So I would love to have a couple volunteers for that committee that would like to work on that.
I'm happy to work on that effort.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would say that since I am associated with the Conservancy, I don't want to be on the HLC committee.
Okay, sounds good. Does anyone else want to be on the?
I would
Commissioner-
raise my hand.
All right, Commissioner Butler, thank you for
Great.
volunteering for that.
Don't bring a disaster. Yes.
Yeah. It's a disaster that created this.
the recovery of the disaster, maybe. We'll somehow commemorate such a big time. And the second announcement I had is that the California Preservation Foundation, as well as we just found out the American Planning Association, are both awarding the African American and Black Context Statement with awards recognizing them. So we, Santa Barbara never really gets recognized at these big conferences, so we get, like LA and San Francisco and Sacramento sort of take the show, so we're going to get a lot of recognition this year, and it's really exciting.
And a round of applause for you.
Yes, thanks. And I know all the Healing Justice members are flying up for the awards, so I think it's going to be it means a lot to them as well, so thanks.
Those are some great announcements. Any other announcements, et cetera? I had one announcement, and for those of you who religiously watch your HLC meetings, you'll have known that at 2 meetings ago, we had the first HLC gavel be handed on, and there's just been a few upgrades to it. That I wanted to, thanks to my son.
You painted it hot pink.
So we can get, if City TV can zoom in here. So,
Awesome.
yeah, so that there's a, there we go.
Wow.
Yeah, so my son and his wood burning helped out. And then we now have a name for it as well. And you can kind of zoom in there. It is the it is the Vitruvian gavel. So for HLC. So yeah. With that, so now, yeah, we can start the meeting.
Beware. Mr. Chair, now that it's been properly branded, it can't be stolen by like this.
Yeah, ABR,
or the single family design board.
That's
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly. It's yeah. And for those of you who are watching at home and have nothing else to do, the Vitruvian principles of Firmitas, Utilitas, and Venustas are Firmitas is built to last, long time and strong. Utilitas is useful, and then Venustas is beauty. And so the architecture, the triad, since Vitruvian times and actually almost all civilizations have had that as part of their goals for architecture. So, all right.
I'm surprised you didn't put poetry in there somehow, but I suppose the third definition kind of
That's
works
right.
that way.
It works for
Charm.
So, all right. So that was announcements.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'd
Commissioner.
like to leave by 4:30 if possible.
All right. We'll keep the meeting charging. All right. On to item E, subcommittee reports. Do we have any subcommittees?
Mr. Chair, as you well know, we had a subcommittee of the De La Guerra Plaza revitalization last week and reviewed additional proposals for the pavilion, which I think the next step is they'll be returning to HLC.
Great.
Mr. Chair, under designations, former Commissioner Mahan and I are meeting with the mayor and our council representative Snedden about the HLC award element. As you know, was given out in '85 and a few years after, but it's not really part of the HLC charge, so the direction needs to come from council. So former Commissioner Mahan and I are going to meet with the mayor and Council Snedden to advance that matter to the council and get us authorized to run that under designations.
All right. Thank you. All right. And thank you for doing that. All right. Other subcommittees? Other subcommittee reports?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the
Commissioner Lenvik.
State Street Advisory Committee was supposed to be meeting on the 17th of this month, and I believe the intention was we were going to start seeing the fruits of the planner's labor. That has been put off now, maybe a month or more. I think they're still working on the fruits. And the first meeting we're going to have is going to occur sometime in May, but we're not sure when yet, date-wise. And they'll be talking about economic.
This little Edwards and Plunkett building. So it gives you an idea of what's around there. So it's in the middle of El Pueblo Viejo, so there are a lot of historic resources surrounding it. And this gives you just, and then across the street is the El Prado building, which we're all very familiar with. But just in case, the Mid-Century Modern Inn. And we also
Can you
have,
point out where that is on the
On the map?
when you get to? Yeah.
it is, should have been right across the street. There, right across the street.
There. Okay. Got
So
it.
here's the site. So it's one of those El Pueblo Viejo buildings, you know, going in the Mediterranean style with some transitioning styles surrounding it. So,
That building right there, is that the Edwards and Plunkett little courtyard?
yes,
dentist
yes,
building?
it
Okay.
is. I think it was built in 1927. So, yeah.
Okay.
So, and we also have, if, you know, for the applicants and the public, we do have the historic resource design guidelines on infill design that are you can use. And the Cantwell building itself has been so altered since it was constructed, even since the 1970 survey, which this is what it looked like in the 1978. It doesn't qualify as historic. So that should set the stage for you as historic concerns. If you have any others, let Heidi know.
May I make a question, Ms. Hernandez?
Sure.
What's that, it's down from the hairdressing salon that was attached to the El Prado? I think it's that hot pink right there. Didn't we have that in front of us?
That's the Mid-Century Modern by Luda Riggs.
Yeah. okay,
Yeah, so
thank you.
you kind of do have you have Mid-Century, Victorian, and Spanish Colonial all on that block, but
Right. There it is. Thank you.
Okay.
And one more brief announcement from staff. I would just like to remind the commission and members of the public that this is a one-time pre-application review and no final appealable action will be take place at this hearing. And the Historic Landmarks Commission purview is limited to the design of the structure and not land use issues such as density. And we also have the case planner, Megan Arciniega, here available to answer any questions you may have. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. And also just to confirm, this has not been, this is a pre-application, so there have been some referencing, or some staff review of it, and if so, what might that be?
Yep, Megan Arciniega, the project planner. So the project went through a pre-application review team, PRT review process with the land development team staff for initial comments. The next step is concept review by the Historic Landmarks Commission, and then we're trying to figure out the next step from there. The reason why is it's an AUD project, so typically we'd go to Planning Commission for their concept review, then they would submit their formal application. This application hopes to retain the Cantwell's market and deli that includes a liquor element, and now we have a CUP requirement for wine and liquor markets. So if they're going to keep that as part of, there's two options: to either permit the building, then come back and get the CUP for the liquor portion of sales part of that, or they can go forward as one project. If they choose to do that, it really just makes sense to go to Planning Commission. They wouldn't do this Planning Commission concept step. It's really negligible at that point, and the ordinance clarifies that. So we really, the design team really wanted to just first get comments, get a reaction to the design and overall schemata, and that will really inform how they're moving forward and what changes, if any. So this is just comments only. We don't really have our next step lined up quite yet, but there has been initial comments from land development team.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so with that, if you would all introduce yourselves for the record, and then you'll have 15 minutes to walk us through your presentation. So, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. My name's
Oh,
Jay.
and actually, can you press the button right there? Perfect, there you go.
All righty. My name is Jay Blatter from Hockhauser Blatter HBA Architects, and I'm here with Carl Benkert, one of our project architects, and Courtney J. Miller from CJM, is it? CJM Landscape Architects. So we're the design team. Also, they're not going to present, but in the audience is our clients, really nice guys, Pradeep and Pranav Shastri. They are the owners and operators of the Cantwell's Market. So they're here really just to just like us, to hear your comments. We're not here, obviously, for an action. We want to get your responses, suggestions, concerns, and then we'll take those all under consideration. So we're not here to solve issues, more to learn and get some insight from your commission here today. As I mentioned, the owners of the Cantwell's Market, they're business owners that have been here for around, I think, 7 or 8 years. They were aware that their project was included in the ADU high priority zone. They have had an intention to improve the market. I'm very familiar with the market because my office is right up the street, and I probably spend more than my fees eating there with my staff, but we're not doing a trade. We're here professionally speaking. As staff said, we did meet with Megan and the PRT team mainly because we want to sort out issues like driveway locations, utility issues, transfer things, so the comments we get from your board don't get preempted at a later date. We come back and go, we want to take this under consideration, but something on the engineering side. So we did get pretty positive reviews, and we made sure the design at least meets those more empirical criteria, as I would put it. It is in the high priority zone. We are planning a 27-unit project with an average unit size of 811 square feet. Maybe we should go, I think you might be familiar with the site, but maybe we should go to the photo board just to, and I think staff already showed some of the historic structures. The existing site is on the corner of Arriaga Street and State Street. It is the Cantwell's Market. The current building, there's 2 one-story buildings there. One is the Cantwell's Market. The other is a one-story commercial project that's currently, I believe, a dance studio, and it's had different tenants over the years. Primarily, most of the site is the parking lot. There's 2 driveways in and out. As I said, it's right up against the property line. There's 2 buildings, so it's up against the adjacent building that's sort of wrapped around us. The design, and maybe we go quickly to the photos, that actually show it, and I'll move on to our concept. So there you can see this is a view of the hotel across the street, the commercial building diagonally across the street, and then I think this shows the Cantwell's Market. Cantwell's Market, it's sort of an interesting building, but due to its configuration, it's shuttered at night. It's not a very street-friendly project as we think a good pedestrian project should be, and that's something that we've taken under serious consideration in the design. We can go maybe now to our site plan, Carl, or even the ground floor plan. All right, I want you to go to the first floor. That's the first floor plan. So our design, what we felt was very important, and it relates not just to the architecture, but the pedestrian activity in this neighborhood, which goes sort of silent at night, was to have a very pedestrian orientation. We have an 800-plus square foot corner courtyard, and I know because I'm always walking there to Cantwell's, and people are diagonally cutting through the existing parking lot. We're proposing to move the dining. Right now, there's some outdoor dining. It's almost in the parking lot, except for a little curb stop. It's a little scary sometimes eating there. We propose an arcade that would include some outdoor dining area and enhance the streetscape. And also, there's an existing sandstone wall. As the State Street slopes down, we are going to continue that existing sandstone wall with the landscaping that Courtney can address to sort of create a little bit of buffer. It's a thin balance between street pedestrian activity and also security issues. In addition, as we turn the corner along Arriaga Street, we've set the building back. Right now, there's no landscaping. We have set it back 6 feet with landscaping, and then once again, we have some outdoor arcades. So we're constantly trying to terrace this building back and as best we can create a one-story, very pedestrian-friendly environment. I'll show you later on the elevations at total transparency, arcades, glass openings all around that courtyard, no blocked up walls. There's currently 2 driveways coming into the parking lot. One driveway is very close to the intersection. It's not a really safe condition. We're going to have one driveway. Our concept is to get all of the parking off the street. So all of the parking, the trash and recycling, everything is going to be enclosed within the building, so there'll no longer be any on-grade parking. We do have some setbacks along the south and the west side so that there's access around the building where currently it's pretty much built up to the property line. The Cantwell's Market will remain. We've not designed it yet, the interiors, but we are sizing it so that we're not going to put shelf space along the outside walls and board that up. There'll be total transparency, connectivity. As we go to the second floor plan, on the second floor, you can see along State Street, we've stepped the building back 8 feet so that one-story arcade will have a sort of a, I guess, a terrace that overlooks State Street. And then same thing along Arriaga Street, we stepped it back 10 feet. So we've tried to keep those arcades one-story elements and to pull the building back. So it sort of starts to reduce the scale, and often we feel those first couple of floors are really important. We've done a lot of urban infill, and I think it makes things safer. We want to have 24/7 activity, residents, balconies, transparency, as opposed to now at night, it's a pretty dark, and I know from my staff, they're not always, it's not great walking there late at night. We want to make it a safer environment. We've also set the building back from the building to the south. We have roughly the building set back 28 feet, so we have sort of a rear courtyard there. And we do have some private terraces that are above the parking structure. We're open to doing roof there and just having smaller terraces, but that does create a nice space around the building that's behind us. Same thing on the left side, we have a 6-foot setback. The other interesting thing is if you look where the lobby is, we have a 23-foot wide horizontal break in the building. So in addition to sort of stepping it back, we sort of broke the building with probably a good 20-foot deep break in the building facade. So it sort of creates not just this, and I don't like using the term wedding cake. My wedding cake was not a wedding cake, but you know, a terracing back of the building. And we think that's, you know, that sort of starts to set the stage, and we're early stages in the design to really break up the massing and the design of the building. And then as we continue up, we can go up to the next floor, pretty much mirrors that. And then as you come up to the 4th floor, we've tried to keep the 4th floor pretty much more to the middle of the site. And there you can see along State Street, we've actually set it back 30 feet. So the top of the roof edge there, or parapet with the tile roof, is a 3-story element. And on the, I would say, the northwest corner, we've stepped it back, and same thing on the center of the building. I think for the most part, we did a little analysis. I gave an exhibit. I think around 46% of the building footprint is the 4-story element, and then I believe it's around 25% 3-story and 25% 1-story. And we did receive some comments. I know there's people from the neighbors here, and we are going to take that under consideration. I feel there's definitely room for us to work with you to ameliorate some of your concerns. We have flexibility within the footprint, and I know Pradeep and Pranav, they want to be good neighbors. I should be talking to you guys, but I see them here, and I want to let them know that we're really coming in here for the first bit of comments. If we turn to the elevations, oh, and by the way, I hope Courtney, I want to give Courtney some time at the end because we are improving the landscaping along the, I better go quick then. We have landscaping along the edge, so I'll quickly, let's go to some of the elevations, and maybe the 3D sheet that shows some of the 3D massing views might be best. So the 3D massing sheet that shows several views of our preliminary model. So you can see here it shows the plaza. What's interesting, back to that last slide, our client said, let's not just have the sidewalk wrap the plaza, let's bring the pavers all the way out to the corner so it gives it more of a civic public space, not a artificially surrounded by the sidewalk. You can see that shows the arcade on the street side, the step back in the building, the rooftop terraces. We kept 3-story elements around this entry courtyard, and you can see where we've stepped it back. And I'll let Courtney talk a little bit about the landscaping, because we definitely, right now with the parking lot along Arriaga Street, the boarded up windows, it is not a very pedestrian-friendly environment there. We also have an outdoor tile stair that can come up to the 2nd floor, so there's pedestrian connection, not just through the lobby on Arriaga Street, but some connectivity along State Street. As I mentioned, this is early in the process. I'm going to give Courtney a few minutes here to talk about the landscape. And as I said, we're here to hear your comments, concerns, questions, so that we can, you know, go back to the proverbial drawing board and hopefully come back with a really acceptable response.
Thanks, Jay. If you could just go to the tree protection plan, it's the first page in our sheet, and I'll try to be brief. We have, I think, 9 existing trees on the property. Most of them are street trees, so we'll be keeping all of those. There's one pretty poor-looking firewheel that's currently on Arriaga that we'll have to remove for our driveway. But otherwise, we're keeping all of the street trees. We'll be adding new street trees along Arriaga. And there's a few existing queen palms between the buildings, one of which we'll be removing, and the other 2 we're hoping to relocate. They're quite nice. They're, maybe 12 feet tall or so. Next page. So as Jay mentioned, I think we're really happy about the amount of space we have on the corner there. So trying to pull in, different brick patterning and really keep it open and kind of friendly and lead people into the front door. We had an idea to do, because this part of the property is actually over structure, instead of doing raised planters, we like the idea of having this kind of massive group of pots. So we have some imagery down at the bottom that sort of speaks to that, but not quite exactly right. And then otherwise around the south and west sides of the building, we have about, I think, 10 feet between the building and the property line. And within that space, we're hoping to really have a lot of layering with different palm trees, narrow, taller tree species to help address the adjacency with the neighbors. Next page. Second floor terrace. This is a fun one. I think we kind of have a different personality for each terrace on the different floors. So this one is, we wanted to feel a lot more like a garden. So the idea is to sort of wrap it with hedges along the south property line and then have built-in planters. And just, these are mostly private areas on this floor. Next page. Fourth floor, so we have our community terrace plan right, overlooking State Street, and that's, we have some space there to work with, so we're hoping that this really feels like a community space. We have, a communal table and some various, ideas around seating, and then the terrace on the upper left-hand side, we're hoping to be more like a space for mindfulness, a quieter space. So yoga, just kind of a beautiful garden setting. And I think that concludes my part of the presentation. If there's anything else, look forward to your comments.
I guess I have a minute 30 to go.
Oh, yeah.
So as far as, the architectural articulation, as I said, we want to use traditional arcades and archways on the ground floor. We're still evolving the design, but the concept is to have a very traditional building within the guidelines in terms of the balconies, the wrought iron work, the tile work. We think around the entry courtyard, we maintained it 3 stories, and we think there with the opportunity not to be symmetrical, but to have a more playful articulation of the facade there. On the upper floor, what you're seeing on the top floor, that arcade is strictly just a walkway to get to the exit stair. It's set back 30 feet. So in reality, lots of this would not be visible from the eye level. And there you can see that's a stone wall that really is an extension of the existing stone wall that continues down State Street. The rear of the building, right now, the Cantwell's building is right up against the property line, so that's primarily parking in the back, but we will put some, rather being right up on the property line, and right now there's trash enclosures and some mechanical things there. We do want to work with Courtney to create a much nicer landscape perimeter around this building, not build it property line to property line. You can see here, once again, the 3D show the stepping, the breakup. We didn't want a box. We wanted to, and obviously to trade off, we do have some portions that are 4 stories, but we had the ability to work within that massing to move that around a bit, and we think we did a good job of sort of keeping it more to the center of the site as opposed to on the perimeter. As I said, I know the site very well. I come there quite a bit, and Cantwell's is committed to staying there. They're a very iconic local business, and they want to continue operation and just make it a more improved setting and a safer setting, and something that's part of the neighborhood that, they are sort of living and working in. So I'll close it at that.
All right,
Commissioner.
thank you.
Chairman Grumbine, I should say.
All right, so if that completes your presentation, we'll go on to public comment. And so anyone in the room that wants to comment on this item, please fill out a speaker slip. And I know there's a stack, but if you haven't yet, make sure you do. And then we'll have you come up and maybe one other extra person there in line to come up to the microphone. And so you'll have 2 minutes to tell us whatever you want.
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. First up, we have Barbara Rook, and after Barbara Rook, we'll have Kirsten Corson.
Right.
Am I supposed to turn this off?
Thank you. Good day. I work at 1525 State Street, the building next door. So two of our concerns was one, the height of being 4-story on that corner. That was a major concern. And then the other is we've just been through the Marriott across the street and all that construction. And our entry into the parking is right behind Cantwell's, and it's underground parking. So it's the accessibility for our patients in and out, and being able to have that accessible during the daytime hours, because we ran into some challenges with that, with the construction over at the Marriott. So those were our major concerns. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kirsten Corson, and then Patty Fick.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Corson, and I own unit number 2 at 15 West Arriaga Street. And I would just like to say that I've been intimately involved with Arriaga Street since my father constructed with Luda Riggs the building at 30 West Arriaga Street in 1949. So 70 years I've been around Arriaga Street. This project is just too big. 4 stories. It's just going to be a giant concrete mass. And talk about being intimidated when you walk down the street by the size of the building. I mean, this one will do it. Plus, you've got the Plaza Linda Vista building on State Street. Then you're going to have this 4-story Cantwell's. And then you've got the Marriott across the street, which goes half a block up State Street. Do we really want this much huge buildings? I mean, this is going to start to look like a downtown Los Angeles. This is not good. Anyhow, you have my written thoughts. I sent them in yesterday. They haven't changed. The thing is just too big. It's not Santa Barbara, and it does not fit in with the historic feeling for this part of town. Anyhow, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Patty, and then after Nicole McLeod.
Hi, my name is Patty Fickey, and Santa Barbara is one of the prettiest cities in California. And that's because of the beautiful architecture, the historic buildings that are here. We're nestled in between the mountains and the ocean. And it's the views that come with nature, views of the ocean, mountains, a light-filled community, big trees, and all of this is coupled with good design that makes Santa Barbara the best city in California. I've resided in the neighborhood more than 25 years at 15 West Arriaga, immediately adjacent to this proposed project. And the neighborhood and my home have all the elements that make Santa Barbara so desirable. The proposed development would take away these elements. I cannot emphasize enough how much this project would completely change the neighborhood and be a major detriment for all Santa Barbara citizens. The size and scale are not appropriate for the site. It's incompatible with the existing developments that are adjacent. The elevation is too vertical and doesn't allow relief, especially adjacent to existing residential properties. Please really review carefully the 100% residential wing of Plaza Linda Vista, which is 15 West Arriaga. There is no side-by-side compatibility for the homes. Our homes run in a corridor from Arriaga parallel to State Street Inn. I understand the solar ordinance didn't apply. I don't understand all the reason why, but the solar ordinance was intended to protect exactly what adjacent neighbors deserve. I have put a letter on file with more complete information. And then on a personal note, lastly, I will suffer a severe negative financial impact due to a lack of privacy. Natural light for my home will be gone. All of my picture windows, I get that. Loss of all mountain views and the loss of any view of the sky from my living area. This impact will seriously reduce my home's property value at great economic hardship.
right,
Thank you for the opportunity to give feedback.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have Nicole, and then afterwards, Bob Lockhart.
Thank you for including us here today. And what I would like to do is invite the commission members to come and stand where I stood half an hour before this meeting at the location. I think that will tell you everything that you need to know about the impact that a 4-story building will have upon the residences and the building directly behind it, which will be so overshadowed that the light, the views will be gone for those residences, and instead there will be a wall. If you can come and just stand and look at the existing residences, their windows, and how even with the attempts to scale things, it will have such a negative impact on living there. My 91-year-old mother lives there, Judith. She's darling. And I visit her twice a week, and I have a difficult time finding a place to park on the street as it is. I move the car if I'm able to find a place. I realize this will also take away a parking lot that is going to, even with residences, usually don't you have two people living in a residence, which is 2 cars, and so there will be a lot of need for street parking, which is already a bit strained. The most important thing I can do is invite you to just look with yourself. I think it's very self-evident how the scope of the project is just not a reasonable fit for that area. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Bob Lockhart, followed by Suzanne Cullen.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to give you some comments. I live at, my name is Bob Lockhart, and I live at 15 West Arriaga and adjacent to 1529 State Street. Most of the concerns I have have been expressed already, but they have to do with the size of the building. Far too big for the lot size. It's been shoehorned into the available space by having fairly minimal green space around it. And its height is also a problem. It's taller than the nearby buildings. Even the El Prado, which has a larger footprint, is only 3 stories high, and moreover is well set back from the sidewalk. I think traffic is going to be a serious problem. Arriaga and State is a busy intersection already, partly because Arriaga provides access to the 101, but also because cars are exiting onto Arriaga from the El Prado and also from the garage at 15 West Arriaga, a garage that provides parking for both residential and commercial vehicles. Another serious concern is the safety of pedestrians. Exit from the proposed building is right near the sidewalk, allowing minimal visibility of approaching pedestrians. On a more personal level, the most devastating impact of the proposal is its west wall. The east side of the residential section of Plaza Linda Vista, where we live, was built with balconies to take advantage of the splendid mountain views and as an architectural feature visible from the street. That will all be gone. The west wall of the proposed project, located approximately just 8 feet from our building, will blanket the entire east side of our building with a massive wall 4 stories high extending from the sidewalk on Arriaga to the south end of our building. And the mountain views, of course, will be completely blocked, as will the sky, as will the light. The wall will also contain a serious loss of privacy because its windows will afford a close-up view into our living room and our bedrooms. Additionally, there will be a significant reduction, as I said, in light and, of course, a significant reduction in our equity. Thank you for the opportunity to make these comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Suzanne Cohen, followed by Jessica Coley.
Let's see here. Thank you, commissioners. Is this on? Yeah. Thank you, commissioners. My name is Suzanne Cohen. I am both the president of the Plaza Linda Vista Homeowners Association and a member of the commercial ownership. The building that I represent is directly next door to this proposed development. First, I want to thank Pradeep and I want to thank Jay because they did invite me to look at the plans, and I admit that I have not gotten back to them with specific concerns. They did ask me for that. I feel like I needed to discuss the plans with the other neighbors and professionals to really understand what's appropriate here and the scope of it. I understand that there is a need for more housing within our community, and we need to address that. My family has been involved in this part of the neighborhood for over 20 years. We know most of the neighbors. We've known several of the owners of Cantwell's over the years. I have raised my family just down the street. And initially, I was excited about the prospect of more housing at this particular space. I still am to some degree. But I want to say that after reviewing the plans and looking at what is proposed, it feels like we're trying to maximize, or they're trying to maximize every square inch of rentable space here. They're squeezing 4 stories into only 48 feet, which as I don't think there is another 4-story building within that area, including the church, the hotel, and the commercial building next door, which I represent. They're providing the minimum amount of parking spaces that would be needed, and I think that it's unrealistic that 30 some odd parking spaces would ever be suitable for this amount of commercial and residential space. I understand that's not something that you have can advise on, but I want to point it out. They're also carving out every single allowable rental unit, which of course we need rental units, but is that appropriate for this area of town? I believe there's 6 residential units in our building and 2 across the street. So we're going from 8 rental units to now we're adding in another 27 in a pretty small area of downtown. So my concerns are that this plan maximizes impact without regard necessarily for what's appropriate for the neighborhood. I'm just wondering if we can strike a better balance between the development and the impacts on the existing neighbors and tenants in our area. To that end, I asked that I would ask specifically that story poles be constructed so that we can actually understand what the scale of this property is going to be, and for you to understand, how it looks when I see the pictures. It could dwarf some of the existing structures. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jessica, and that will be my last speaker slip.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here and get to see faces in person. And my mom bought her unit at Plaza Linda Vista 24 years ago, and it's considered a penthouse, and it's got a wraparound deck. and it's really beautiful. And she bought it with the intention to live there, but it is also my inheritance and my sister's inheritance. With this proposal, she will lose a bedroom, kitchen, and dining room, as well as the view, and there'll just be a wall right there. And so what we look at now is the beautiful, snow-covered mountains a few weeks ago, and I think it's just, it won't be the same value. I spoke with her yesterday. She was very upset that, her one thing that she can leave my sister and myself is this apartment. And now it will be without the views towards the northwest and north. So we're just worried about privacy. And then with the fourth story, it looks like it'll just be looking right down at the terrace, which will have no sun at all. So we lose light and views and privacy. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Grumman, we do not have any more speaker slips as of right now. Turning over to virtual public comment. If there is anyone participating virtually who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and we can call on you. I am seeing one raised hand. Oh, never mind. We had a change in mind there. No raised hands as of right now. We did receive written correspondence from Steve Johnson, Chris Hamilton, Kirsten Corson, Joan and Robert Lockhart, Patty Fick, and Tom Calgian and Tom Carlson, which was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting. Oh, looks like we have some raised hands now. Let's see. We have a call-in listener with an area code of 917. I'm going to send you an unmute request and allow you to speak. Please go ahead and unmute and we can call on you.
Hello. Hello. My name is Catherine Hensler, and I live at 1525 State Street. I am in the other unit, which Ms. Cooley had just spoken about. On the third floor of Plaza Linda Vista, there are 2 units. I've lived here for over 20 years. My bedroom, front door, everything, and front deck that faces the mountains and faces El Prado will be completely dwarfed, and I will have no privacy with four stories hovering over me. I am right against Cantwell's right now, and my concern is the height and the lack of privacy that I will encounter by having 4 stories hovering above me. It will completely take all the light, everything away from me. So I just wanted to reiterate what my neighbors are feeling about this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Chair Grumbine, I do not have any more raised hands. So back to the commission.
All right. Okay, so let's bring it to the commission for questions. Who wants to start us off? Commissioner Drury.
So I have a couple.
And actually, could you sort of wake up the computer? That's our, yeah, thanks.
Wake me up.
I'd like to go to sleep.
Yes, just 2 questions. What is the maximum height of your project?
The maximum height to the highest point to the 4th story is 48 feet.
48 feet. And what about the El Prado across the street? Do you have any idea?
Well, it's interesting. We were
I'm
looking at
my
the El
interruption.
Prado.
Do you mind speaking into the mic just so
Oh,
it
sorry
picks
about
up on
that.
City TV? Well, it's helpful for people who are tuning in via Zoom.
I apologize for that. The El Prados, I don't know the exact height. It's 3 stories right across, but then as it goes back, we actually were tracking a line at its highest point. It sort of matches up because State Street's climbing, so as it climbs, we do a straight line across. But directly across from us, it's 3 stories. I can get you a height, but I don't have the exact
It might be useful
height
in the
feet.
future.
But it does step back. Oh, it looks like,
So they match our 3rd floor?
yeah, basically, it matches our 3rd floor, their 3rd floor, and then as you continue up State Street,
Expansion.
their expansion sort of matches our 4th floor. So it's,
Okay.
So I apologize, I don't have exact dimensions.
it's no
but
problem. We're
Commissioner
just
Drury,
into
I
the
can get that
concept.
information for you.
All right. Other questions? Commissioner Lundvik.
I have a question of staff, if I might. What benefits have accrued to this project by way of the AUD ordinance?
Chair and Commissioners, it's a good good question. To clarify, the average unit density incentive program encourages more units, more density along State Street in the downtown area. So it includes increased density, 1 parking space per unit as opposed to 2, so reduction in parking requirements. Also reduction in open yard, or not reduction, but flexibility in open yard design and standards. It also, it does require an inclusionary element though, so some affordability element has to be incorporated into the project. And there are a few other incentives, but height as well. So it also increases it to 48 feet in height for the downtown area.
I think I understand that the AUD, while increasing density, one of the purposes is having smaller units. Is that reflected in this design?
Yes, so there's an average unit size cap. So you get more units, but on average, they have to be under a certain size, and they meet the average size limitations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Other commissioners?
Chair?
Commissioner Drury?
Yeah, so, just to refresh, it's been a while since we've had AUD here, you know. So, the setbacks are virtually zero, right, in terms of the property.
Can you go to the site
The
plan
west-
or the
For instance,
best
the
way?
west wall and the south wall would seem to be the most contentious parts because of the neighbors.
Correct. The interior setbacks are 0. The front setbacks, which is along State and Arriaga, would be a 5-foot variable setback.
So it's 0 on the south and 0 on, okay, thank you.
So that, and just to be, for clarification, that's what, they don't have to have setbacks. They can have 0 feet.
Correct. That means they
And-
could build to the property line. That's what's required. So there's no setback required on the interior setbacks and a 5-foot variable on street-facing property lines, which basically means it's a 5-foot setback, but you're allowed to encroach. Any area that encroaches into that setback has a balance of a cutout essentially into the building beyond the 5 feet. What they're proposing is beyond that. So they are proposing optionally or voluntarily proposing their own setback on the interior.
And they're
they
not
meet the
required
variable.
by the statutes of AUD to push the setback to its maximum. They
No,
could be, okay.
no.
The only other thing is, what does that tower encompass? Is it an elevator shaft?
That's an elevator, yes.
Okay.
And that's still under design consideration. So once again, we come here with a very, very open, flexible perspective
All
on
right,
things.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on the site plan, if we could go back to that. I note that you were just on it. Back to, yeah. There you go, that's good. The visibility triangles on Arriaga are at the curb, and my impression was that they're supposed to be at the property line, and I brought up several sets of plans online, searching for a visibility triangle, and it didn't give me the code section, but it showed me a bunch of plans, and they all had the visibility triangle at the property line, not the curb. And that's the way I've always drawn them. But I'm curious, does this comply here? It seems like there's no point in having visibility triangles if the building can be nearly at the sidewalk.
Commissioner, I'll have to look at, that's a transportation review, but yeah, it is usually at the property line back.
It makes sense, because the point is to protect pedestrians.
And I know there were comments from transportation, so we asked the applicant not to revise their plans in whole before coming to you, because the idea is that the comments that they get from the PRT and from your commission are then digested to either take straight to Planning Commission or if they choose to redesign. So I don't know that all of those have been addressed. I'll look right now for their comments.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jordan?
I have a, excuse me, a question about landscaping and about the slot between your building and I think it's 1525. That would be, what, the west side on the plan? What are we calling it?
South side, I think.
South side?
Plan
Okay.
south.
How much, my question has to do with the viability of that as a landscaping area at all. How much light is that going to get on a normal, on typically hour daily?
Question is along the south property line there, how much light?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly. I do know that we've,
But I mean, it's a tall building on both sides. It's a narrow, deep slot.
Yep.
So my question deals with, is there going to be enough light for landscaping?
yes, absolutely. Especially since we're on the south side of the building. We'll be getting the most sun there than we would anywhere.
But 1525 is immediately adjacent, right?
Yes.
One thing I do want to address with that comment is, once we get above that first floor, we've stepped the building back 28 feet. So I think you can see now, granted, that's not south-facing,
Right.
but when we worked with Courtney, we did take into consideration that we're pushing everything back 28 feet from the property line. So it's not that wall that you see on the landscape plan is the ground floor only portion over there for that major section of the building, and we do have other step backs. But I'm not a landscape architect, so I'm not qualified to say how that would affect the plants.
Other questions?
Would you show the overall site plan that shows the adjoining buildings? I think you have one. You saw you flip by it.
We can bring that up, sure. There, I think that's the best one there. And I do want to point out, Commissioner Lenvick, that this is the ground floor plan again, so it doesn't show the upper sections where we pulled it back.
One of the requirements of submittal, and this isn't a question, unfortunately, Mr. Chair, but one of the requirements of submittal is that
Isn't, how about try to start with isn't
Right.
one of the requirements?
is that adjoining properties and their improvements be shown on a plan so that we have a good understanding of the relationship. And I think when you come back, it'd be good to have that plan showing the adjoining buildings. Check with the city's zoning department, planning department. They have handouts on the requirements for submittal. And the same is true for the exterior elevations. You have some, nice exterior elevations, but you don't show them in the context of the adjoining buildings. And I think it would be helpful for us to see that.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
That's a good suggestion for the streetscape elevation on State and Ariaga. Not a problem.
Any other questions before we jump into comments? All right. I had one.
Pardon my interruption, Mr. Chair. Cass Ensberg did submit some questions that she wanted voiced at the hearing. I don't know if you would like to.
Yeah,
read
sure.
them out or-
I can go through those, and then I'll have one more too as well. Okay, so one question was where is Cantwell's area imagined, and I think you went through that, at least in the ground floor one. Outdoor connection between Cantwell's and the outdoor dining. You talked about in the arcade, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these.
No, you're correct. We just haven't articulated which doors. We haven't laid out the interior, but there'll be plenty of
Gotcha.
connectivity.
Gotcha. Yeah, there. A2.2 and 2.4 are corridors, non-corridor spaces, and the courtyard roof deck number 2, access through the arched openings. No doors are indicated, so I think you touched on that too. You're going to be developing it. A2.4, privacy deck is shared by 2 units, 405 and 408, and that's a question right there, I think, or no, that one. Okay. So is that shared by 2 units?
I think currently it is, and we haven't really finalized the design of that deck yet.
Okay. All right. A3.2, is it clear that although the adjacent building says mixed use, it is only mixed use at the State Street side, and this portion is all 2-story residential with a parking garage below? So is it are they separate buildings, or I guess is her,
I think they may have separate addresses, so we viewed it as one L-shaped building, but that could very well be true that the commercial portion's only on, I think, on State Street. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then is solar panels planned for this building?
Yes, we're going to, we definitely are bringing up conduit and inverter connection points, and we've shown on the roof. And our client actually is very committed to doing the solar, not just the potential tap, and he wants to include the solar as part of his, energy and sustainability commitment for the project.
Okay, great. Okay, and then I had a question of, speaking of solar, the solar ordinance, have you looked at that? And and if so, what have you found that your building is doing on the solar ordinance side of things? Is there, what is the?
So, Chair Grumbine, the solar ordinance only applies in residential zone districts, so commercial zone districts, it doesn't apply, which this is.
Have you done any solar studies with it of what the shadows are that you'll be casting?
Sorry. No, we've not done a detailed solar ordinance. Primarily, most of our shadows are going to be, cast to the north, but we can, we'll look at that as we, continue to try to work through some issues with our neighbors next door.
Okay.
Regardless of the ordinance, we'll try to work with them.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, why don't we go into comments? This is for comments only, and we might want to have sort of a general discussion, or why don't we just kind of march through, and I'll try to record some of this as well for comments, but kind of having a general discussion of they're here first time seeing us, and what are some of the things that we want to see, what are the things that we're liking and not liking, and see if we can come up with some general directions. So, who wants to kick us off?
Mr. Chair, I'll be brave.
Vice Chair House? All right.
I was waiting to see who
Yep.
was going to be brave. My first impression when I looked at the drawings was I thought, this is really nice, the architecture. There's, I forget what word you use. We use charm. That's, but no, there was, what's that? There's that too. But yeah, there was a lot of whimsy to it, and I like the fenestration and how things aren't all symmetrical, and it doesn't look like your typical apartment building, with a lot of repetition. So, you're off to a good start there. But I have to say, it's just too big. And when I think about that squishy term, neighborhood compatibility, which nobody has a definition for, but this thing is swinging for the fences. I mean, it's pretty much though it could go to the property line since it has a commercial component, it's 6 feet, which is, minimum for a residential kind of development, and then the height setback, it's up to that as well. And I can't read it clearly from here, but I'm guessing that tower exceeds the 48 feet as well. So then I went to the site and studied it all around, and that was very illuminating. For one thing, this elevation we're looking at right now, or we're looking at, does not reflect the slope of State Street. You do have that properly reflected in your 3D views, but there's a 3.5-foot drop from the corner, the north corner to the south corner. Then I also, studied the relationship to the residences at 15 West. And, while it's just an unfortunate fact of life, you buy a unit with nice views, and then the property owner next door has every right to build something there too. And so we can't protect the mountain views that those neighbors currently have. But it is not neighborhood compatibility to have a 4-story high wall right next to your 2-story, 2.5-story. I mean, it says 3-story on the plans, but that also is designed around the slope of the street. And so from Arriaga Street, there's a pretty deep dive into the parking garage, and then there's 2 stories above that half-story. So that made me start thinking about, well, how could you do the same thing? And some ideas were, instead of the entrance to Cantwell's up at the corner, maybe make your outdoor seating in that location and get the door lower down, you could get the building settled into the ground, 2 or 3 feet, and that would help. I'm all for 9-foot ceilings, and was it floor to floor you had on there at 10.4 or something? Yeah. So I seem to remember hearing 9-foot ceilings. I don't know exactly what they are, but the El Prado across the street, I could tell from looking at the doors and how much height there was about that. Those are probably 8-foot ceilings in there. So there are just a lot of things pointing to this being taller than it needs to be. And we can't tell you to remove units, but we can say it doesn't have neighborhood compatibility if that's what we feel, and that's my feeling about it. So, if you could get your driveway to dive in and you could have somewhat split level, elevators don't have to, can accommodate that. So I think there are a lot of tricks you could still use. And I agree with the comment that was raised in questions to have the next door buildings reflected in illustrations like this so we can really get a better context. Those are my comments.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may?
Commissioner Drury.
Yes, I agree with Vice Chair House's comments, and I would encourage it seems to be an incipient relationship between your neighbors to the west and your neighbors to the south, and maybe something can be, I think neighborhood compatibility is really important. I think compatibility between neighbors is very important, and I know that we all have an idea of what we'd like to see in terms of the sky, the ocean, the beaches, the mountains. I would encourage you to continue a dialogue with your neighbors.
Mr. Chair? Sorry, Commissioner Lundvik,
Okay.
and then we'll go Commissioner Butler.
Yeah, thank you. I look at our standards, our guidelines that we have to live by. And they're not secret. They're available in other forms at the city planning desk. This is an infill design, and the guidelines say that the purpose of these guidelines is to ensure that infill development complements existing buildings, preserves neighborhood character, and is well integrated into the neighborhood with a cohesive and well thought out design. And it goes on. Okay. It mentions compatibility, and we always have a problem with that. But our guidelines state, for the purpose of design review, compatibility is defined as a project's ability to integrate harmoniously with the desirable architectural qualities and characteristics which are distinctive of Santa Barbara and the immediate neighborhood. And it goes on. It talks about studies and, you show the 10 closest buildings and, yada, yada, yada. You can read that and get that information. With regard to average unit size density and the program, it talks about how the city wants to encourage smaller housing units, locating housing units close to transit, so on and so forth. It talks about that. And we respect that. It goes on to say, however, there is a balance between advancing the objectives of the AUD program and approving an appropriately designed project. The characteristics of each project site and its context and surroundings must be evaluated to ensure proposed development fits into the neighborhood. This is the city is telling us this, and of course you're aware of that. And finally, the city must make deliberative findings and fully explain how all project compatibility criteria have been evaluated. And I think it would be good to have that compatibility criteria, which is referenced in our agenda, before us now almost, so that we know what we have to do to approve this or any project. Right now, I can read the compatibility findings, but I'm not going to. But I think it's important that we all have them. But I think there's some pretty clear standards that we have to look at when we take and approve a project. And right now, I think there's a lot of stuff, as Steve House says, there's a lot of stuff which you've designed, in a very pretty manner. But we have to take into the whole thing. And I think the whole thing right now is a little maybe overwhelming for this corner. When you look down State Street in your block, you're out, I think, the furthest to the property line, to State Street, except for the building on the far south end of the block. Everything else is kind of in. And I think if we were to see that in plan, and you were to look at it closely in plan, you might say, maybe we have got to do something more. The arcade is nice and it's appreciated, but it's still out there on, with 6 foot back or whatever it is. And I think that when you look at that block, your building has to get closer to what that block is, I think.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Butler?
Thank you. I'd like to follow on Commissioner Lindvick's comment, because the first thing that struck me was the design, as reflected in the surrounding buildings. And I don't believe this design reflects what's already there established. This is much more busy, let's call it that. There's a lot of extra design here. So it doesn't, from a design standpoint, doesn't quite reflect what you see in the adjoining buildings, across the street, et cetera, et cetera. I'm too familiar with it. So that would be my first thought, was simplify the design, simplify it. Secondly, I would agree with all the comments about bring it down, 4 stories, and I just made a note to myself, shrink to fit. Shrink this down to fit on the location. Keep Cantwell's, that would be great. I think having a marketplace or a market in there, and which I'm familiar with as well, would be a great addition to that locale. That would be terrific. But shrink it to fit, simplify the design, and have the design more reflective of the buildings that are up and down a couple of blocks in that immediate neighborhood.
Commissioner Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several specific comments and then a more general comment. First, I want to endorse a lot of the comments that my fellow commissioners have made. Looking ahead to future reviews, it's very clear that light and cast shadows and impact on views will be a significant topic going forward. I've got to believe that there's modeling software that would show us what shadows casting would be with different designs, and I would expect to see some modeling of the shadows in future ones. I also would expect going forward, I would be one who would be calling to see story polls for this as this went forward into the future. Third, I'd like to see fuller documentation of the surrounding context of the design in the surrounding context, and I think that's just echoing comments that others have made. On a more general level, the issues here on this project, on this site, the implications are huge and they go far beyond this project. Issues of density, of height, of reduced parking demands and of neighborhood compatibility are all emerging as under both the AUD program and state mandates that are trying to drive us to taller, denser, bigger buildings. So what's happening here is really coming out of a set of larger issues, and those issues are not going to go away. So in particular, things like the parking demands, the right of property owners to build, even if that inflicts damage on adjacent property owners. All of these we're going to keep seeing over and over and over again. So things like what is neighborhood compatibility legally for us is going to be a crucial issue going forward.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Jordan.
Mr.
All right.
Chair?
Yes.
First, just want to acknowledge that I heard all of the concerns that the public have expressed, and it seems that they boil down basically to height, scale, loss of views, and privacy. And it is unfortunate in our developing world that some of those things we cannot do anything about. And some of them are privileges and not rights. But I hope going forward all of those somehow get massaged so that we all come out more comfortable about it, even though we don't necessarily get what we want out of it. So that's in general. Second, we don't have anything to do with the zoning privileges for this parcel. That is someone else's purview. And while we all like to talk about it, we don't have anything to do with it. We're here for compatibility and beauty. Well, beauty in a broad sense. And so I agree with a lot of the comments of fellow commissioners. Unfortunately, this particular version of your proposal seems to be too big in an area where there's a lot of small stuff. And also, I suppose, an unfortunate consequence is that as properties develop, they will get bigger, especially along the State Street corridor. So, there's that balance that has to be somehow struck so that we're all happy about it. But in terms of the design, I think the language of the architecture is squarely compatible with our guidelines. There's obviously lots to work out in the detailing of that, but in general, I like the language of the building that you've designed. And if you continue in that vein, I think that your design will be successful ultimately as you navigate and negotiate all these other things that are going to impact ultimately the development. Certainly, I think we can all say we support the need for housing, and someone who says they don't support that probably ought to be is a liar or run out of town, one of the two. However that gets sorted out, under whatever program you propose it, housing is a critical issue and should be provided. So in general, I'm supportive of the idea of a mixed-use project that has a commercial, pedestrian, shopper exchange on State Street and can interact with the street in that way, with the housing component mixed in with the rest of the building. I think the landscape direction and concept I like. I think the more green stuff you can get in a housing project, the more comfortable and more friendly and more pedestrian it seems. So I like the direction that you've gone. I don't have a problem with the strip between your building and the adjacent because the sun is traveling in the right direction. If it were traveling in another direction, I think you'd have a hard time with some light in that little strip. But those are my general comments so far, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lundvik.
Two things. About a year ago, maybe less, we had a project that was in here, not unlike this, in which an infill was going in between a couple of existing buildings. And the architect must have spent an untold amount of time making sure that where his window placement was compatible with the existing neighborhood windows and doors and views. And he really juggled openings, 2 or 3 feet one way or another, simply to get an agreement, I guess, with the neighbors that they had done the best they could. And I think that would be worthwhile exploring. Is how do you look from the existing apartment, and what do you look at? It's important. The other thing that have gotten burned on recently is garage access being right at the property line. And we've argued long and hard to get that garage access door back behind the primary elevation of the building. And we have won in some cases and we've lost in some cases, and we've been badly burned driving by today, garages that are right there, and it looks horrible. It looks horrible, and we've got to prevent that from happening. So I think if you have an opportunity to get your garage door back further, in some way, shape, or form, it's going to improve its acceptability to us. I'm done.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple additional comments, and one of those is when I looked at the site plan, that was kind of another telling thing. It just seemed like the landscaping existed in strips here and there just wasn't any substantial area of landscaping, especially compared to the Plaza Linda Vista next door. It seems more generously set back and more lush landscaping in front of the building. And second of all, or secondly, the roof deck on the northwest corner seems like that would be a good nod to the neighbors to not have something, it could be a smoking area, it could be party area, and that just wouldn't be too respectful for the neighbors. So those are my other comments.
And then my own comments to add.
Pardon my interruption, Mr. Chair. If you wouldn't mind reading out Commissioner Ensberg's comments
Oh,
before
yes.
you launch into
Okay.
yours.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
All right. So she appreciates the stylus in the right direction. That was also coordinated with the other language of the design is compatible. Big picture, the building is too massive given the current pattern along State and Arriaga, with the majority of Spanish small one-story structures, a few two-story, and small three-story, plus the El Prado at 3 stories along State and Arriaga. The impact of the two-story residential condos on the Arriaga side should be studied and mitigated. Suggest study of how to reduce the size and offered the follow questions to help study. Could the amenity space be deleted? Are they really of value given most units have nice little decks and that the location has great access to Alameda Park and many downtown amenities? And I guess that would, we can roll back into questions for that. Has there been any thought on that, the amenity space, and eliminating that? Yeah, yeah. Is that even allowed?
Yeah, we definitely are
doable?
flexible. You know, we're involved in a lot of housing projects, and we're seeing different trends since COVID. We have projects where we have very little amenity space, and we try to make the units livable so they can get a desk and homework. We have projects where they're saying there's so many young tech people living, they want us to put a little recording studio so they can do their TikTok videos, which we probably don't want to have done in here. We'll have the, Chinese government getting all my plan files out of it. But no, we're totally flexible and taking your comments into consideration, I think those are the areas we can start to compress things and rethink some of those decks and amenity spaces. So the answer is a yes to Commissioner Ensberg.
Okay. And then could roughly the same number of units be accomplished in 3 stories by mixing in a few studio apartments and reducing the size overall? Could this help affordability by design and provide options to better mitigate the impact of neighboring condo units on the Arriaga Street side, as shown in one-bedroom units ranging? So basically, is there a way of also even keeping things as you have numbers-wise, but reducing in scale that still fits within? Yeah. Yeah. That's and it'll be a comment to at least study that, where you can get it. Let's see. Can more study be given to how Cantwell's is likely to be designed so as not to lose the attraction and its historic small town local deli feel with a special flavor? So I guess, and maybe that reading into that comment is kind of making Cantwell's right now is a building, all by itself. Making this read as you kind of have some of that with the arcade. It's a special separate piece, but Cantwell's doesn't really have a visual like cue that this is Cantwell's. Yeah. Yeah. So whether that becomes a massing thing or what, I mean, a way of.
And I think also, as I mentioned earlier, because we want that, a lot of older supermarkets board up their perimeter for shelf space. We want to have something that's more engaging with the public, so we haven't laid it out yet. So the answer is yes, and we want to consider not just the interior, but to keep that sort of connectivity, visual, 24/7 with, what's going on around the site. So yes, we'll certainly, Cantwell's wants to maintain their identity. They're not a big box supermarket like Ralph's or Bristol Farms, and they want to keep that neighborhood market feel for sure.
Okay, great. And then I'll tack on my comments now. We got through Commissioner Ensberg's. I agree with what pretty much most of the commissioners have been saying in general about the size. Mass bulk is the main challenge. Also, a little bit of simplification of the Spanish, a little more towards Edwards and Plunkett. Spanish. I would also say that in your elevations, there's not a strong differentiation between State Street and Arriaga. There's a similar treatment on both, and there's nice massing breakups and things like that. But and looking at this aerial kind of shows it well with the plaza, which is a cool move. But they're both kind of being treated as equal massing, and I think the reality is State Street's more. And I think this will come out with some of the streetscapes that we'll ask you to do for the next. But as you're studying both streets, the biggest thing you have going is the El Prado right next door on State Street. And yes, it does wrap, but Arriaga is the minor street and the smaller street, and I think it should be treated in a little more sensitively than that way. And State Street can, in my opinion, hold a larger mass, and so maybe if you're stepping a little bit away from your neighbors more in terms of your massing, and making State Street and especially the corner of State Street be the strong. I think that's the opportunity for where the density wants to go, not necessarily just as a setback, but really sort of setting back from your neighbors and holding that corner. So that's my own 2 cents additional. But so with that, I'll give a shot at summarizing our comments, and then we'll see if there's any other things to add, and go from there. Okay, so we'll just start at the top. So I think in general there's the feeling that 4 stories is just probably too big for this site, given the neighborhood compatibility that needs to be found for mass, bulk, and scale. So lowering it from 4 stories, as you do that, looking at the sort of the mass and bulk. Looking at removing areas such as the amenity spaces and others to give more breathing room to the neighbors on the south and on the west. Also to do solar studies and show how your building is going to be casting shadows and affecting especially the neighbors. Shading the street is nice, so it's nice to shade the sidewalk. Let's see, garage opening on Arriaga needs to be pushed back, and also study or check on the view triangles.
Visibility triangles.
Yeah, visibility triangles, sorry, thanks. Visibility triangles as well, and confirm that those are, where they should be. Regarding design with the neighbors in mind, please try to create in 3D, as we've had before, your neighbors and also their major windows or spaces, so that we can see how you're designing sensitively with their existing the location of their existing windows and outdoor areas. The height, floor to floor, might be a way of also bringing the size down, so that it's not maxed out, or maybe in special places, or maybe volume ceilings at the top or top floor, things like that, so that you can get the mass down in height. Another suggestion was to study sinking the building into the ground a little, so that it's more aligned with the lower portion of State Street, corner of the property. Let's see. For items to come back with, so they're at a point where everyone's comfortable with story poles. I think it's going to be whether you want to do it with the next design, or whether you want to do the next design and then come for story poles. But one way or the other, story poles are going to definitely be a part of this project, at least in anywhere near this size. So that will be eventually. So the streetscape elevations need to come back with adjacent buildings, and looking at the 10 closest buildings is a good start and a good study as part of that. And then that goes for Arriaga and State Street, and all surrounding, especially immediately adjacent properties. let's see, and with, accurate heights on them, then that'll include the Prado. Let's see, one comment was that we should have probably led with this one, but we can always switch it around in our notes. We thank you for coming to us with a good design in general, especially regarding the language of the building, and so we're pleased with that. It's going in a nice direction on the design front. Regarding the design, to simplify it a little more and look at some of the Edwards and Plunkett examples next door. Let's see, talked about that. The landscape was only favorable comments and going in the right direction. So continue on that, on the path you're going for that. Let's see. And then we talked about amenity spaces. Also, in your study, as you look for reducing the massing and maybe trying to keep the unit count as well, just look at your numbers and how that might shift, because we don't want to, at the same time, we do want housing, and so we're very favorable with the housing component, which is the most of the project, and we don't want to reduce that. And then, as well, study designing the Cantwell portion so that it's visible from the street to be its own, have its own character in some way. Try a design with those things in mind. Did I miss anything?
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair,
Gray.
could we suggest that the streetscape on State Street be from Valerio to Micheltorena? Because there are significant buildings.
Okay, yes.
I mean, and this is just for an inventory of, visual inventory.
Yep, so streetscape from Valerio to Micheltorena. Okay, great. Okay, all right, is there any other comments to add? All right, is it all clear in terms of some direction?
It's clear. I mean, we have we have work to do on this, obviously. We'll study it. I can't really say that we can fit everything without some small portions of, some four-story elements, but I particularly like the comments as far as maybe shifting away from the more residential side, and if we can handle a little more mass on the State Street side, along with eliminating some of the amenity spaces, maybe look at the floor-to-floor heights. I think you gave us some good things to chew on, but, now it's a lot of work to, take all these ingredients and try to come up with a good, good design to come back, but we'll go at it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, thank you to the applicant as well. All right. Okay, all right, should we take a little break or?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have numbers here, do we?
Oh, we have the other, item 3, which is, item 3 is at 2:45? Oh, I thought we were behind, but we're actually, okay, so we'll take a,
So it's part of my interruption. It's 3:06 right now.
okay.
And that clock is wrong. So technically, we can start at any point, but if you'd like to take a short recess and then
Maybe we take a recess and change that clock.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm okay with
Yeah,
it.
good to see you.
How are you?
Yeah, great. How are you?
Good. How's your kids doing?
Oh, they're doing great. Yeah, our son Gabriel just did the.
city attorney wait. That's not a good thing.
He's just going to yell at us anyways.
We get paid by the hour, it's fine.
All right, should we call to order? Ready? Okay. Calling to order Historic Landmarks Commission. We're calling back to order. All right, we are on to item 3, which is a discussion item for Brown Act training. And thank you for coming to us with this. You don't look like Tava.
I do not. I am the B team. I am sorry. I apologize. Ms. Ostringer felt ill today and she had to leave. So you're getting the B team today, not the A team. So I apologize. So thank
welcome
you.
if yeah.
Thank you. I'll start. Thank you, Chair Gombrine. Commission, it's an honor to be here. As I said, Ms. Ostringer regretfully couldn't make it, so I'd be happy to do this. I do these type of trainings too. And my goal today, I know you're all familiar with the Brown Act and have done countless of meetings. My hope is to, clear up any misconceptions maybe you've had over the years about it, present maybe some new legislation on it, and, open up to any questions, so feel free to interrupt me as we go on. And as I mentioned, this is the overview of who's covered in a meeting, what's a meeting, illegal meetings with the notices and agendas, and we always do a good job here. Our staff does an incredible job. Public rights in terms of participation. Closed session, I'll briefly discuss. We really don't ever have closed sessions for this type of board or committee, and criminal penalties and civil remedies. With that, there's never been actually a prosecution criminally in the history of the Ralph M. Brown Act, too. But it's out there, but there's never.
Put your hands behind your back.
Yeah. I always like starting off with this quote. This quote is always, I love this quote because it talks about the purpose. It's the first section of the government code, which introduces the Brown Act. And in that you'll see there, it's basically the final sentence. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. And that's so important because I recognize as a commission, and staff can recognize it, Brown Act can be really a pain in the rear, right? It's not the most efficient way to go about things. It's definitely not the most convenient way to go about things, but there's a purpose for that, right? We are here to serve for the benefit of the public, and it calls for transparency. And because there's that call for transparency, while it might not be the most convenient way, the most efficient way, it is the most open way, and that's how we have to conduct our business. So sometimes I even get annoyed, like, oh no, or sometimes we miss something in the agenda, well, we got to put it on for the next month, right? Like I said, it's not most efficient, but there's a reason for it, and I myself remind myself of that section of why we do that. Who's covered? Well, you guys are certainly covered. Commission, boards, other bodies. Standing committees are covered. We as a policy looking now at the city, we're trying to discourage standing committees. For example, the Harbor Commission, when I started advising them, had about 5. And there really is no need for a standing committee for a Harbor Commission because they're appointed by council and they should opine on, what the areas of the harbor are on the waterfront, right? So having a standing committee for a harbor commission is like a box within a box within a box. Like, when do we stop doing that process? But they are also subject to a Brown Act because if they have continuing subject matter of a jurisdiction and regular meetings. But we, as for our purposes today, the HLC is a Brown Act committee. As we mentioned up there, city council, city boards, and then groups created by councils or boards. So one example of that would be the State Street Advisory Committee. They also are, they're new, they're not charter created. They are a Brown Act committee. And so if you look at our charter, we have about 10 or 11 boards created strictly from the citizens through the city charter. And then we probably have another 60 or 70 created by municipal code, resolution, et cetera. And all the majority of those are Brown Act committees. As I mentioned, what's a standing committee? Brown Act applies, so it's less than a quorum. So if you have 5, it would be, 2 being in there. Includes other individuals not part of the body, so it can have different, and it could be advisory or decision-making, meaning it could put forth an opinion paper, a presentation to the large group at whole, or it could be making decisions on rules. For example, let's say, one example is on cruise ships, right? Decision-making on the policies and procedures when passengers disembark off a cruise ship, right? They have a fixed meeting schedule, and they have a continuing jurisdiction over a particular subject matter. Those apply.
So
Here's
John,
where it doesn't apply.
So,
go ahead.
So, John, for us, an example from advisory to decision-making For structures of merit, we decide what the structure of merit is, but we don't for landmarks. The city council does that. So
Correct.
in one role, we advise them, and in the other role, we make the decision. That's what
Correct.
you're talking about.
Yep, that's exactly it. And you are, and this board, the HLC, does both, and they have that. They constitute both. So another reason why you're a Brown Act committee adds to that list: fixed meeting schedule, etc. What's not a Brown Act, and which I try to push on a lot of the commissions, and I think it gets to the heart and core of what a lot of committees and commissions want to do, is an ad hoc committee. I prefer the term working committee or working group. I think that's more efficient, right? It's less than a quorum, right? It's only comprised of the members of that group. It's advisory only, so no decision-making. Very short term and no fixed meeting schedule. And why do I like it and why do I think it's efficient? Let's say you have a committee of 7, or 5, and we get 2 to work on this particular area, right? And it's not going to continue on forever. We want you to provide an opinion on, I'll give an example, on fees for slips, right? For the boat, I'll use Harbor, for example, right? Why don't you develop a working group, get 2, right? And you're only going to give an advisory opinion to the Harbor Commission as a whole. It's only short term, meaning within 4 months, we'd like you to come back, working group, with an opinion and a paper for us to consider in terms of setting fees. You're not required to set meeting schedules, and you can go on and do actual work. You can meet with constituents, you can talk to different people. You don't have to worry about any of the Brown Act stuff. It's like a research project that you're gathering, and you don't have to have this Brown Act hanging over because it's a working group. And then that work will eventually get presented, in terms of transparency, will get presented to the larger group at whole, which would be a Harbor Commission. So I think those are appropriate. Those are I think, meet a lot of times what commissions want to do when they want to look at a particular issue. It's really a short-term issue. They don't mean it to hang over the head with no end in sight, like the never-ending story. And it's really about being able to be free from the Brown Act and do the research to bring back to the entire group as whole. And for those, the Brown Act does not apply. Just for curiosity, Brown Act also could apply for private corporations or LLCs that are created by the city. One example of that could be the Housing Authority, but now it's changed since that time. Private corporations, LLCs that are funded from the city, that have a voting member can be covered. And council member elect, so not commissioners elect or approved or anything like that, but council members elect, the Brown Act applies to them as well. And we already talked about the ad hoc, and so this part's pretty easy. What's a meeting? Pretty common sense. This is a meeting, right? Anytime you're hearing, discussing, deliberating, are going to take action, right? Taking action being key many times, but even just hearing. So really, there's not going to be an action taken in this item, but it's part of a meeting as well. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Action taken, as we know, it's a collective decision made by the majority. Could be a commitment or a promise by a majority to make a positive or negative decision, or an actual vote. So it doesn't actually sometimes have to even be an actual vote to be considered an action taken. There could be a promise in the future on something like that as well. Again, when it applies, or there's a gathering of the majority, a quorum. So in order to have our meeting, we always have to have a quorum before we start. And, it's what we normally do here. We hear, discuss, and deliberate. So these are all pretty much common sense areas. Now we're going to talk more interesting issues, right? We're going to talk about what's illegal, and then we're going to talk about what's legal, too. I think that's really where the confusion lies about, commissioners can't talk to each other or outside meetings and, all that, right? So we're getting the nitty-gritty, right? So serial meetings are unlawful, right? And they are there when people are talking, it could be on the phone, could be through Skype, outside the meeting, where there's a discussion and deliberation, and to take action. When we're saying take action, remember how I said on the slide before, a promise to do something in the future, maybe to vote yay or nay on something, right? So that's important, right? And how serial meetings can be done? They can be done via text, via email, notes, stone tablets, through Sanskrit, if we can write that, go for it. It's all part of serial meetings up there.
Does that include notes under the park bench?
It includes notes under the park bench.
Scratch on the dumpster.
Straight out of Watergate. Yep, absolutely. That would include that as well, right? And so The Brown Act, the literature over the years have defined two types of serial meetings, the chain meeting and the wheel and wagon, the spoke meeting, and I'll explain both, right? So chain is really easy. And the reason these are important is because a lot of times, I imagine this commission and the vast majority of commissioner board members never want to commit this violation, but the problem is, a lot of times, if you're not careful, it can occur without even your intent, without your knowledge. And the chain is a perfect example, right? A speaks to Commissioner B about an issue. And remember, all this has to do with issues in the and I'm going to repeat that later on in the presentation. It has to be within the jurisdiction of the scope of the commission. If you want to talk about the upcoming baseball season, or whether President Trump's going to get indicted, or any of those things, go at it. I don't care if there's a group meeting or anything else like that, or you're posting on each other's Facebook accounts, and we'll get to Facebook later too. Those are not Brown Act violations. People are like, oh, we can't talk to each other. No, you guys can, the commissioners can talk all they want with each other, but if it deals with like historic resources or stuff like that within the jurisdiction, that's where the no-no occurs, right? So if you have a chain, one commissioner is talking to A to B, right, and then B takes that message and goes to C, and C takes that message going to D, also now you have a quorum of people in the know, but A never knew, or B never knew, or C never knew it, because it was transmitted from one to another. So when A originally talked to B, they may have had no clue that that communication, that message would have gotten to D, and all of a sudden you had a violation, right? So a wagon wheel is kind of the opposite, where let's say A is the center of the wheel there, and A and B talk, and B is one of the spokes, and C is another spoke. All of a sudden, all the commissioners are talking. Maybe A knew about it, but B, C, D, E, and F had no clue, and all of a sudden you there had a violation of the Brown Act too. So that's where you get the thing about. So the simple rule is when it comes to jurisdictional matters covered by this board, just best hands off, leave it for these meetings, right? Here's the social media policy. It's going to sunset in 2026, so we'll see if the state continues on. And it basically talks about, for social media platforms, it prohibits communications from between two members. So it doesn't even need a quorum. Two members of the body. So it could be Commissioner Howson and Commissioner Butler talking, commenting on an item, again, in the jurisdiction of the board. Let's say one of the commissioners voted in terms of we need more protection on historic resources, and I view this part of the ordinance needs to be updated. Something to that effect, right? And another commissioner gave a thumbs up or a thumbs like. You're committing a violation under 992 because even though it's not a quorum, even a thumbs up has been viewed, and I'll get to it, as communicative speech, so it would be considered a violation. And so the key is, do not communicate each other on each other's social media on issues related to the subject matter jurisdiction. You are free to comment, again, as I said before, on football, an opera, a great restaurant to eat in town, whatever may that be, but just that. So you cannot communicate, as a Bright Line rule says, you cannot communicate directly on an internet platform regarding subject matter. So it just needs to be one to be violated. It doesn't have to wait for two other commissioners to chime in. So it's an unusual rule. It's a temporary rule, but it's in place for the next few years.
Question on that.
Yeah.
And I guess it might be also another, and more general as well. So what if about things that aren't projects, that aren't like, about, a historic resource that is, a historic building that has nothing to do with any project or anything else? What about talking about that? Like the courthouse. I love the courthouse.
Sure.
Yeah. Arches in that courthouse.
I think that's fine. I don't anticipate the courthouse coming anytime soon with a project.
As long as it's not on the radar.
It's not exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
'cause otherwise
Something clear and obvious like a traditional landmark. That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
And of course, it's not in our jurisdiction, so.
Oh,
That's true. It's the county. That's a very good point. So the county's property too. So you even doubly safe for the courthouse. So yes. Like I said, but the difference is you can communicate with the rest of the public on your social media. Now, when you do, let's say you do it on a project, there's something different than the Brown Act would apply, and that you got to be careful. That could be, you got to be worried about bias and everything else, where you may have to force to recuse yourself if you're communicating too much about an impending project. But let's go separate from an impending project where you don't have to worry about bias and recusing yourself. Let's talk about, in general, the city's overall policies on historical resources, or eventually when we have new updates to the LCP or the city's general plan, stuff like that. You can communicate all day long with the public on that. There's nothing to stop you under the Brown Act and communicating via social media or advertising things. But again, because it's potentially within the jurisdiction, those items in the board, I wouldn't communicate with each other on that, and that's probably the safest advice to give. And then right out of the legislature and how it's been interpreted, it doesn't even have to be a statement. It could be thumbs up, emojis, symbols. All that's considered communicative speech for the purposes of this law. So any other questions regarding this new? Yes.
Does the public have a right to lobby individual members of a commission? Somebody calls me up and says, I want to have coffee with you to talk about something that's on an upcoming agenda.
Sure. The public can do that. They can try. But what happens is you would then have to disclose, because that would be considered potentially ex parte communication. And before the start of a meeting, you would have to disclose it. And I would, from an advisory standpoint, discourage that, because you don't want to be able to say where all of a sudden now you're called into question and pulled into that issue, where you have to disclose and potentially maybe already bias or input has been formed. So in those situations, what I would tell a member of the public is, look, I understand you want to talk to me. I love being engaged in the community and helpful, but this communication would have to be disclosed, and eventually, potentially, where the conversation could go, it could end up being disqualified. So the safest thing is always to keep that conversation in the meeting. And if you're presenting in part of the project, the commission and board are allowed to ask you conversations, and we should be able to have that back and forth dialogue in here, and that's the place to have it. So that's how I would respond to
That
that.
conversation is one way. You stand there and he's you're just another guy.
That's a great question.
He's drawing you.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you-
yeah. Commissioner, that's a great question. So in that case,
nothing,
yeah. So in that case, you never said anything to indicate bias. You just sat there and listened. Didn't say anything where someone could come back and use the statement and says, "Well, that shows bias because in response, this commissioner said that." In that case, all you would have to do is just say, "Look, what happened was you still have to disclose the ex parte contact because that person imposed the contact on you. I totally get it." And say, "This person talked to me on this. I'm just disclosing it. I just sat there and listened. I didn't respond at all. I formed no opinions, and I'm able to proceed
No
and listen
thumbs
to
up,
this."
no emojis, nothing. Just
Yeah, all that.
No silly faces.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, when it comes to that, just unfriend each other over here. That's my advice. Just all of you unfriend each other, and you're all good. Then you're safe for sure. Next thing, here's something people always think is it a Brown Act violation. It is not. We can have unilateral briefings. So you can talk to members of the staff individually about projects, issues, email, question. You can do it with Heidi, Ellen, Ms. Ostringer, Tava, everyone on that. That is not a Brown Act violation. The reason why is because we are not members of the legislative body. So we can definitely have those one-on-one communications. What staff has to be very recognized is we can't take what we talked one-on-one and spread that information, and nor can you tell staff, well, if you have a meeting with this commissioner, tell them I said this. So, but one-on-one meetings with staff, absolutely. You can even do two-on-ones too, because it's not a quorum. We're not violating the Brown Act because staff is not part of the. The Brown Act does not apply to staff. And we talked about lobbying. Here we go. I forgot about that. People can do that, right? Individual contacts, conversations, absolutely allowable. But what you can't have is a person acting as an intermediary. Now, you may not know that person's an intermediary, but as long as you're not directing it, you're okay under the Brown Act. So you may have a person come in. People do it all the time. People lobby council, all the council members. Maybe it's like VBRO or Airbnb, wanting to pass an ordinance for allowing vacation rentals. They probably will talk to and lobby and talk to each member of the council members and advocating a point. That's perfectly fine. It's allowable. But what we can't do is have that person designed as an intermediary. And so that's an important distinction. So, people think, oh, since that lobbyist or that person from that company or that project talked to 3 or more members of the board, we have a Brown Act violation. No, that's not the case at all. Also, all of you can attend community meetings. You can have a quorum. There's no problem with that. It's not like, oh, there's 4 of them in here. I gotta turn around and leave. No, you could attend community meetings. There should just be no sidebar conversations about, again, your subject matter jurisdiction. If you see each other, you can say hi. You can talk about the weather, upcoming rain. Everything is fine. Again, it's just strictly on the jurisdiction that this board is here. So there's no reason. All the commissions can attend the council meeting if they want. There's no problem with that. We're not having a legal meeting by doing that, right? As perfect example right there. Majority attendance in an open meeting, legislative body. Just no sidebar conversations with each other. Again, about your jurisdiction. It could be about public safety issue. Sure, you guys can all have sidebar conversations about that. That's not within your jurisdiction. So the meeting of city council could be about public safety and homelessness right now, right? And after that, if there's a break in the meeting, you're standing on the hallway getting water, all of you could talk about, what did you think what they said, the council member this, or what do you think of the police department's plan? That's perfectly allowable. That's not in your jurisdiction. If you're talking about, what about this project we're hearing upcoming next week? No, that's not allowed, obviously. Again, same rule applies for social or ceremonial occasions. See, all of you can attend. There's no restriction on that. Again, just no sidebar conversations about what you are doing. Again, like I said, sometimes I'm repeating myself. It doesn't apply to employees. Staff can also all the time, and we do it, provide documents to the entire commission, like a memorandum. I'm sure Ms. Osterring has done that in the past before on issues or opinions. None of that constitutes a meeting, so that's perfectly allowable, and it's protected material too. It doesn't have to be disclosed. Teleconference meetings is the same thing. Can be audio, video, or both. We also must post per the Brown Act the agendas at all locations, including, let's say you're staying at a hotel and you're zooming in. It has to be posted there at the hotel. And you would have to allow, I'm sure it'd be a very interested person, to even come to your hotel room to sit there in the meeting to listen to the meeting too, if that's required under the Brown Act, right? But we must, under the Brown Act, a quorum has to be on location in order to have a meeting. So that part, you could have 2 maybe remote for a meeting, but the quorum would have to be actually on site. Agendas, right? They are always required. Discussion is usually limited on it. Usually, like I see a lot of agendas, you may have new items of business or stuff like that, where you can say, in the future, I would like to see this item on this issue. Give a little brief description, but get in and out. Don't at all talk substantively about an issue, right? Matters may be added, but it really has to be rare, urgent situations, not like, forgetfulness or convenience, but like an emergency type situation. Meetings must be non-discriminatory, obviously free of charge. And there's rules for special meetings, right? So I'll get to that in a second. But here are the general requirements for your regular standard meeting: 72 hours notice before it starts. Brief description, enough to give the public information that what the subject matter will be discussed and what action potentially be taken. Doesn't have to even exceed more than 20 words. And where the meeting is located at the time. And this commission does a great job. They even get down to usually the time the agenda item will be even heard, like 2:45 or 3:15. So that's fantastic. Again, we are really strictly limited to what's on the agenda. And again, think back to that first slide, right? What is the purpose? For the benefit of the public. We put that on there because, remember, the public be like, oh, that's an important issue to me. I'm glad, I want to attend that meeting. I normally would not attend, but that's a really important issue to me, and I want to attend. So that's why we have those requirements that, we can't discuss. If we add stuff or discuss about stuff not on the agenda and the public missed it, they, imagine being upset. Well, I would wish I could have participated and given my voice, my public comment to that situation. There are 5 exceptions, right, in terms of that, and we'll go over that. And the commission, I've seen, whenever I've appeared or seen videos, the commission does an excellent job of this, right? You can respond or ask questions or make a brief comment when someone's giving public comment, right? You may do that. You may ask clarification from staff on an issue. That's a brief report about activities. Again, that's fine as long as it's brief or a brief announcement. Those aren't violations of the Brown Act, right? You also can provide reference to the staff or request staff to report back, or ask maybe staff to take an action to place an item on a future agenda. And all our commissions do that. That's why I usually like having a section in there where we have new business, where we are able to place items on the agenda for a future occasion. Right, the only time you would need it, and it's very rare, I haven't even seen council do it, I think once in the last decade, but something that was needed immediate action, and it was brought to the attention of the city after the agenda was posted. That's the one rare exception, and it should be rare, it should be strictly followed, but just to give that. Special meetings are a little different, right? They are a situation where it requires a little less notice. It could be different reasons. It doesn't have to be. It could be urgent, but it doesn't have to be so urgent. Where we're talking about being able to put it immediately on the regular agenda. It only requires 24-hour notice, right? And the thing is, no other business. That's the key. During a special meeting, no other business can be discussed during that meeting, and there isn't general public comment either. Public comment has to be specifically as to what that special meeting is called for. So that's the rule on special meetings. Attendance conditions are prohibited, right? You can't ask a person to provide their name. I mean, I know we have our sign-in sheets, but if they want to provide their name as Ronald Reagan, so be it. Let them come up there and speak on it. It doesn't matter, we just have that as a courtesy to know who wants to speak or not. But it's not an absolute requirement. We could say, well, you didn't do the sign-in sheet. If someone raised their hand and say, we should, for all intents and purposes, allow that person to speak.
Wait. So you're saying somebody can speak anonymously?
Someone can speak anonymously, right? We can't ask them where they're from, where they live, what their name is. They can absolutely do that.
Can we ask an anonymous person what their credibility is? Why should we listen to them? In other words, what's their warrant for speaking? It's not asking their identity.
Sure.
It's saying, do you live in Santa Barbara? Can we ask that question?
My advice would be, here's the typical lawyer advice. It depends, right? If they're drawing a major issue and a concern, and let's say it's in a project, and you can potentially ask that question. Like, look, I hear what you're saying. I'm interested in your input.
You're trying to verify if they're a stakeholder.
Yeah, you can for that, yes, if they have standing. But if you're having general public comment, no, yeah, let them speak. Normally, what I would always usually advise is try not to engage during public comment. But sometimes sometimes people bring up really good issues where you do want to ask follow-up questions and all that. And so we don't want to chill that from occurring.
So I just want to confirm because we always ask everyone to please fill out a speaker slip with your name.
We do, but
But if they dig their heels in, your point is we can't require them.
Well, we can require them for signing in a speakership, not signing in for the meeting, but we can't require, thank you for letting me clarifying that, but we can't require them to put their real name or anything else. So someone comes in, look, if you want to speak, you need to put in the speaker slip and all that. But if you want to attend the meeting, you have to sign in this sheet. No, you can't do that, stuff like that. Yeah. But if they want to do that, we can do that. So thank you for that question. I wanted to clarify that. I appreciate that.
But they could use an alias or
Sure.
anonymous on their speaker slip.
Sure, absolutely.
Obviously, Ronald Reagan is not going to testify in
I
front
don't
of us.
see
He's
that.
been,
But-
he's
but-
been dead for a few years, but
Well, hopefully that person remembers they called themselves Ronald Reagan. So when we announce the name, oh yeah, it's me. I need to go up there and talk. And everyone has a right to record meetings. These meetings are obviously recorded and broadcast on our city TV and YouTube, and et cetera. And any inspection of it too, per the Public Records Act and this government code, people are allowed to have that. But it's great because we provide all our meetings on our website. So someone usually we say on those responses when we get requests, here's the websites. You can go listen to the entire meeting or watch the entire meeting there.
The person who wants to record a meeting, though, that right ends when the meeting is adjourned.
Correct.
They can't follow you outside.
Correct. There's a California Penal Code. We are a two-party consent state, which means actually more than two-party. For that, if there's a place for an expectation of privacy, and let's say you're by your car or getting in your car, something like that, or anywhere else, you need the consent of everybody around you to record and everything else like that. But yes, the ability to record ends, but then, in terms of you're sitting there taking a bathroom break, no, there's some expectation of privacy located in that area. Again, we do every meeting, every regular meeting, special meeting, et cetera, must allow the public to address the body, right? And as I had before, For special meetings, they can address the item for that special meeting, but not on anything else, because special meetings are just geared for one or two specific agenda items that necessitated the need for having a special meeting in the first place. Again, for public participation, we can't prohibit public criticism. They're allowed to do that. There's some famous California cases, that have even borderline hate speech with Nazi salutes that give wide latitude for a public meeting. Again, public comment's not a debate, so best rule always advice is avoid back and forth. Sometimes you just let people give them their 3 minutes and thank you, and that's it. Some people want to be people to be combative and engage that. A new law, which is in place, no disruptions are allowed. So if someone willfully interrupts the meeting and their disruption is so significant the meeting cannot go on in terms of having a productive meeting, then we can prevent that person from being removed from the meeting. What we normally do is we'd pause the meeting, go leave somewhere else in the building. I'm sure staff will direct you. Obviously, we'd be calling the authorities to escort that person out of the meeting. So there's new laws for that. But it can't be someone about a disagreement. If they have their 3 minutes, let them have their 3 minutes. But they're shouting over and yelling and continuing, that's a different story. And finally, closed sessions. We don't have to really worry about it here, but I do want to provide, since the full Brown Act training, I always include it in my slide. There's really about 5 areas where closed sessions are allowed, right? Personnel matters, but in order to do so, the board that's hearing closed session must have the ability to appoint or terminate that employee. So they can't do a review. That was an issue before with the Community Formation Commission developing like a police oversight. Since the charter gives clear authority to the city administrator on discipline for employees, and since the Civil Service Commission is the sole body to hear disputes on police officers, they had no ability to appoint or terminate police officers. So that's why they had no ability to go into closed session and review personnel file or active investigations in the police officers, right? So this commission doesn't have the ability to appoint or terminate. We don't have to worry about. But council does, for example, but it's only for 2 employees, city administrator and city attorney. You can do closed session for current or anticipated litigation, labor negotiations. You need that. For example, I'm the city's labor negotiation team to talk about how negotiations are with council to get authority on what amount can we go to or what concessions we can give. Real property negotiations, for example, acquire properties, selling properties, that can be done in closed session. This one I've never seen, but it's there as a public security threat. So we have never had one for that, but if there is some public security threat, you can go into closed session for that. And though that is my presentation, just the final thing is the reminder meetings, the key is to be open, transparent, and let the sun shine in. That's, for federal law, they call it or a lot of states call it the sunshine law about that. We're the Brown Act, so that's my presentation. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
All right. So,
We don't need a motion to continue that matter.
motion to accept the Brown Act?
Mr.
Don't discuss it. Don't discuss it.
Mr. Chair, we do need to open public comment for this.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, of course, and let the sun shine in. All right, any public comment from anyone in the room? Are you sure, Mr. Corral, you don't want to talk about the Brown Act? All right.
Did you learn
do we
something?
have any?
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. Turning to virtual, if anyone would like to speak on the training, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, and then we did not receive any written correspondence, so back to the commission.
All right. All right. All right. I guess that was a legitimate item now. Thank you. Yeah. All right. We're on to item 4, our final item for the day. This is for 623.5 State Street. This is a new item, project design approval and final approval. Located in the EPV. The project is between the Fithian Building, historic structure of merit, and the Pierce Block Building, listed on the Historic Resources Inventory. Proposal to demolish the facade of an existing 2000 100 square foot commercial building to construct a new facade. Project includes 49 square feet of concrete paving to be replaced with brick pavers. No change in existing floor area is proposed as part of this project. Project design approval and final approval are requested. Project compatibility findings are required. Project was last reviewed on a one-time pre-application consultation before the full commission on February 15th, 2023. And if we can pull those minutes up, we'll go over those. And if staff, I don't know if staff has any additional comments as well.
No, Mr. Chair, no additional comments from staff. I believe you covered it. The project is here for project design approval and final approval. And then here are the, if I can get there. Here are the comments from the previous review.
Okay, so, oh, great, thank you. All right, so it was, the comments, in general, the commission is in favor of the design, is very much fits within State Street. 2, study having a more traditional, slightly more elaborate cornice. 3, study breaking up the transom above the doors in a more traditional way, such as a vertical muntin that align with the doors. 4, the header above the doors should also have more traditional detailing. 5, the continuation of the State Street brick pavers into the threshold is acceptable. And 6, at least one commissioner would like to see more detailing in plaster on the sign inset. All right, so if you would take us through your plans, show us what's new, how you answered those comments, and yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
First, that was cruel and unusual punishment to have to
Now you know how we have to deal with.
Should tune in the TV to see where we are on the.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I believe I've covered all of those. Maybe, let's see if I can go to, how do I do this to get to the next set
You
of
can go on the
drawings?
right-hand side, you can click down, or
Yeah.
The arrow, okay, so this,
or yeah, there's the
More
arrow.
left,
This
more
arrow?
left.
here?
No,
left.
to the left of that. There we go.
Oh, just above there.
That down arrow.
That arrow,
Yeah,
that one
there
right
we
there.
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've seen all of this. The lower left-hand detail shows I've got the State Street brick that'll be extending under the threshold door for the exterior. Currently, it's just red-colored, broken-up concrete. So that was one of the comments that I'd planned on doing anyway. And then another comment was to add a little more elaboration to the cornice detail, which I've done here. You can see that in these details.
If you want to enlarge one, just hit the Z key and then draw a marquee around what you want to enlarge.
Okay, Z key, and then hold.
for you to say.
Yeah.
It is.
particular, it's detail 5 and 6.
5 and 6, okay. So I got to press shift and then,
No shift.
No
Just-
shift.
Just the Z, and you don't have to keep holding it, just touch it. You've got now draw a marquee around it.
Box it.
Click and drag with left click and drag it.
left click and drag it.
You can actually use the mouse.
Yeah, that'd be,
Yeah.
I'm used to a mouse, sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, and then I can pull it up, or
Yeah.
how do I get it to,
You're fine.
oops. Sorry, guys.
The scroll wheel will help you
Yeah, let me
go
go
up
back.
and down.
Yeah, okay, let's do it this way.
We'll walk it over there.
Okay, that was our plan. Okay, elevation, I guess you can see the cornice molding detail here. And then another subject that's coming up was the added mullions to the window transom above. So you can see those here. And then you'll see in the details on the transom, I came across some clavos that I wanted to add those to the transom for a little more traditional detail. And then here are the details 5 and 6 of that cornice molding. So there's that. And let's see, up here in the upper right, 2A2, this is the clavos detail that I came across that's about 4 inches in diameter. And I think it'd be simple, but add a little traditional elegance to that transom. And I think that's what we had. Sections, you're probably not interested in this. This is all the structure.
No, thank
We
you.
like structure too.
Do you? Okay.
It has to stand out.
Well, a more structured life.
Well, let me read some
only
of
the
these
surface that
general
matters.
notes then.
Yeah.
We're shallow.
Okay. And they, let's see, get back to the elevation. Well, let me go all the way back then to the photographs. So, now how do I, let's see, whoops.
You can also use the plus and minus little buttons go in to zoom out of the
Yeah,
page.
yeah. Okay, well, this,
At the top.
here we
Yeah,
go.
There we go.
That's, whoop. There we go. That's the one I wanted. Okay, so the colors, the storefront system is going to be black, satin finish, and the color finish on the plaster we're calling to match the Fithian building next door. And that's my presentation.
And do you have the black doors and windows called out somewhere?
I do. There are on the elevation, let's see. Just my elevations. They call them out here on the cover sheet, maybe.
If you want, you maybe.
Yeah, I got to see where
Yeah.
Mike called those out. I think he did it on the cover sheet.
Should be a keynote there, I would think.
Well, yeah.
5.
Did you see it?
Yeah, on the page. There was a note 5 on the door.
If you hit H, it'll turn into a hand and you can drag it around.
If I hit which?
If you hit H,
H?
Oh, there we go.
it's a hand and you
Note
can
5.
drag it around.
Oh, God.
If they were paper,
Yeah.
we would have the last 10 minutes of our life back.
You and me both. So,
We lobbied for digital for a long time. Now
Yeah.
we want analog.
okay, so that.
Aluminum
note
folding
5 is
door,
calling
fancy
that out.
finish, or
But there is
factory
a
finish, color black. It says right
Yeah,
there. Okay,
it's got that one.
great.
Don't ask
Just-
any more questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't ask.
All right.
Somewhere there's a note about
Yeah.
the Fithian building color too, so.
Okay, great. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, so now let's go to public comment. There's no member of the public in the room, so any member in space?
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. I do not have anyone participating virtually, and then we did not receive any written correspondence, so back to the commission.
All right, thank you. All right, to the commission for any questions. Any questions?
No questions.
Easy, all right. Any comments, discussions, et cetera?
I think it's great.
Motion.
I think it's very supportable.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Or-
What are we doing?
Final project is.
PDA and final approval.
Okay. and-
Second by
Oh,
me.
oh,
All right,
he
and
got-
second by Vice Chair House.
We don't have a litany of conditions
Yeah,
where
there's-
we have to
Yeah, we got it.
run through compatibility, this, that, and the
Yep,
other thing.
There we go.
You did
Recycle
that,
your
you did
paint
that last
cans.
time.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to project design approval and final approval. It is consistent with our guidelines. It is compatible with the neighborhood. It is of appropriate size, mass, bulk, height, and scale. It is sensitive to the buildings that are next to it. Most of them are historic resources. Public views of ocean and mountain are not impacted. And the little open space that it has is going to be compatible with the sidewalk that's next to it.
All right.
And the seconder concurs.
And yep, so that's the next one. All right, under discussion, any discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. I'll take the roll call vote. Commissioner Butler,
Yes?
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Dorden,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
and Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. And this action is appealable within 10 days to City Council. All right?
Right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you.
All right. And meeting is
Adjourned.